Okay, hello everyone. A very warm welcome to today's webinar. I hope everyone can hear me. If not, just send me a chat if you can't hear me clearly, right? So I'm Karen, Assistant Vice President for Cargo Solutions Commercial in PSA Southeast Asia. Now for today, PSA and Enterprise Singapore have specially organized this industry conversation on supply chain developments to share insights on the kind of disruptions that we are seeing in today's global trade and supply chains. So many of you would be interested on the reasons why those disruptions are happening, more so in Singapore, especially if you have manufacturing and processing activities here locally. So for today's session, we will deep dive into those insights, and my colleagues and I will also share on some of the solutions that some of the affected customers have been working with us to mitigate their challenges. On the line with me, I have my colleagues, Mr. Ang Bidi, our General Manager for PSA Cargo Solutions Southeast Asia Private Limited, Ms. Teo Chin and Ms. Kwek Ting Fei as well, Deputy Managers for Cargo Solutions Commercial. After our sharing, there will be a Q&A where we will pick up your questions through the chat. So just feel free to send in your questions anytime during the sharing session. Now, before we go into the presentation, I would like to invite Mr. Lau Chong Ming, Executive Director for Transport and Logistics Division from Enterprise Singapore, to just share with us some of his thoughts. Chong Ming, please.
Thanks, Karen. Hi, everybody. Good afternoon. Really great to see you here despite being a Friday afternoon. I know how precious Friday afternoon are, so really appreciate you spending this 1 hour with us. I'm Chong Ming, Executive Director for Transport and Logistics at Enterprise Singapore. And I think this is a very important topic today where we talk about supply chain resilience. Now, I think we all know that disruptions come and go. Many of you have faced various types of disruption over the past decades or ever since you started your business or doing business. So it's nothing new to you. But what I think going forward is that disruption may be something that's not really predictable. It can happen anytime, and it could happen anywhere in the world at any part of the supply chain. So looking at such uncertainties, at Enterprise Singapore, after we talked to many of our companies, we also learned a few things. So most of our companies actually already have some form of business continuity plan, or BCP for short. But my suggestion is to place a little bit more emphasis on the supply chain resilient part, beyond just the other parts of your BCP, like human resource, finance, and maybe even power and so on. So I think supply chain resilience is something that you should really place emphasis on. So the first thing is, let's get our BCP enhanced, strengthened, and more robust. I think the second thing is many companies already started to look at how to diversify both sourcing and markets, as well as diversify other parts of the value chain. I think this is quite important because, like the old saying, you do not want to put all your eggs into one basket or few baskets. So today, I think we need to be very cognizant that supply chain disruption can happen anytime, anywhere, and we better be able to activate alternatives. So this is quite important. And at the same time, we also encourage companies to strengthen your linkages and your relationship with your supply chain partners. That means whether it's your upstream, your downstream, your logistics service providers, your shipping agent, your freight forwarder, it's best that you strengthen relationship with them. So at any emergency or any disruption, you can better count on their support and their help. Third, we are pushing a lot of digitalization initiative, and we all know that many companies are adopting digitalization and automation at a very rapid pace, especially after COVID. We want to encourage those who have not done so to press on with this, and for those who have done so to continue to enhance and strengthen the digital connectivity. Why? I think it is very important that we move beyond manual, paper-based to digital and technology-based, not just for the sake of productivity and efficiency, but also for supply chain resilience. Having digital data, having the ability to see the bigger picture, having more visibility, clarity on various parts of your supply chain, or even where are your cargoes for that matter, will actually help you a lot. Now, if you know that your cargo is being stuck at a particular port or city or warehouse, and you actually have that digital connection, you will get to know much quicker compared to a manual-based system. And with the data that you have collected from other parts of your supply chain, or even if you have other data coming in from other systems, you are able to look at a more complete picture and able to quickly adjust and respond to that disruption. Okay, so I think the above three are actually very common sense and logical suggestions. Many of you are doing it, but I just thought I want to reiterate it again. And for those who have not done it, please do it. I think I want to take this opportunity to recognize also our partner PSA for really stepping up during this COVID pandemic, coming up with a lot of new solutions, putting in additional resources, and really, cracking their heads, brainstorming with customers and partners on how to keep the supply chain moving with minimum disruption. I want to appreciate our partner PSA for doing that. And in extension, I also want to thank all of you for keeping Singapore and Singaporeans fully supplied and equipped. Whether you're a manufacturer, you're a trader, you're a distributor, you're a logistics company, I think I want to take this opportunity to express our gratitude to all of you. Our ports are open 24/7. Our airport is open 24/7. Our logistics companies are working round the clock to move things, whether it's an essential product, is it food, is it a pharma, or manufactured products like semicons, chemicals, and so on. I think that's what keeps Singapore going. And this is very important because in this pandemic, there are very few places which actually can keep things going uninterrupted. So I think we are one of them. And people are taking notice of that. At Enterprise Singapore, we are hearing of interest or requests from many national, international brands. They are interested, to see how they can leverage on Singapore, whether as their transshipment, as their re-export, as their distribution for the region. I think this bodes very well for us moving ahead. Not only we are able to maintain our global trade and connectivity hub status, but actually because of what we have been doing and how you guys have been performing, we are going to attract more potential interest and hopefully convert them into real business for all of you. So I think this is something that at Enterprise Singapore, we want to work with all of you, all our partners, to achieve that. Last but not least, I think PSA today is going to share with you many valuable insights, ranging from not only just Singapore, but throughout their global networks. They have been helping their customers, their partners to keep things moving, So I think it's very important that we engage PSA, hear from them. And more importantly, because by bringing all of you together into a conversation, that's why we call it an industry conversation today, we hope to really facilitate a closer and tighter community type of meeting between the different players in the supply chain ecosystem, in the trade ecosystem, in the logistics ecosystem, in the manufacturing ecosystem. I think we all have to work together. There would likely be trade-offs. There will likely be some form of, cost implication and so on. But I think we must all work together because this is not just about any one of us, but it's also about Singapore. So I think it's quite critical that we have this conversation. So Enterprise Singapore is very happy to start this, to initiate this. But actually, I want to encourage all of you to keep this thing going. So please engage us, engage PSA, even after today's event. Let's keep things going, keep the talk, keep the conversation going, because only by more open communication, we can understand each other's needs, requests, and pain points more clearly. And then we all can come together to actually try to see how we can help each other. So I want to end on this note by saying that there is positive outlook out there. We are all facing pains. We are all facing some, things that we need to resolve, issues, challenges. But hey, let's come together. Let's all work together. So once again, thank you for joining us this afternoon. I will pass the floor back to PSA where we can hear more about them. I encourage all of you to ask questions, whether through the chats or through other means. Engage PSA. These are our experts in supply chain. So thank you very much. And it's great to see all of you. Thank you. Over to you, Karen. Thanks.
Thank you, Chong Ming, for that short but no doubt very meaningful sharing of thoughts. I think for me personally, I always enjoyed listening to Chong Ming speak because his speech is always full of very relevant themes and key takeaways that we as businesses should have. So he mentioned a few things like resilience, diversification, alternatives, linkages, digitalization, and open conversation. And I think through the sharing of the next couple of slides or so in the next 20 minutes, we hope that at the end of the session, these are also the key takeaways that you can have by looking at some of the examples which we will present on the collaborations of solutions that some of the customers have been working with us to tide over this period. Okay, but of course, when we say this period, there are a lot of disruptions happening. Some people may feel the container shortage issue more keenly. Some may feel the issue of vessel capacity shortage more keenly. So I think it would be good to first take a step back and look at what's happening in the supply chain today, because only by understanding the kind of environment we are in, then can we move forth into an open conversation to see how we can help each other tide over all these challenges. All right, so this question, how did we get to today? I think it's a favorite question that's on everybody's minds right now. COVID, this period of COVID seems to have been happening to us for a very long time. But actually, if you all come down and think about it, it's just about like slightly more than a year ago, 1.5 years ago, that we everybody got ourselves into this web of disruptions, right? So are we still in the midst of a pandemic, or are we in the midst of a new normal? Frankly, it's quite hard to tell. Let's go back a little bit in time to really understand how we got to where we are today, right? So if you remember in the last quarter of 2019, actually a lot of media reports were actually saying that there's going to be a decline in container order book. It was an era where we were facing quite a bit of geopolitical tensions, protectionism shifts from our ex-US President, Mr. Donald Trump. So it was also quite a period of uncertainty. That world trade in 2020 was still growing, but not as rosy as maybe several years back when China was really the growth engine and all that. Yeah. So came on to first quarter 2020, that was when all of us global economies in the world were really struck by COVID. And then the virus spread very quickly from the first point of contact in China to all global economies. And that was also when we really first felt the first sharp impact of that global trade contraction, more deeply than we thought we were going to have in fourth quarter of 2019. Frankly, because all the factories were facing a sudden close down due to all the lockdowns. I think pre-COVID, we have never really expected this unprecedented level of lockdowns, but all the sudden closures of the factories, especially those in China, really meant that global trade took a very big dip. Air capacity was decimated, and over at the seaport side, I remember we were looking at double-digit kind of possible a volume decline, simply because the vessels coming to the ports were also less than half full, right? But strangely enough, 1 quarter later, until third quarter of 2020, there was this sudden or huge spike in demand. Why so? I think it was in that period of time when the first wave of the pandemic was kind of slowly easing off, and a lot of the economies thought that they could open up. So the lockdowns gradually eased. But at the same time, although people were going back to workplaces and all that, most of us were still staying at home, working from home. And we actually saw a change in consumer purchasing behavior in that aspect. We are all purchasing more goods online, whether it's white goods, electronics, laptops, gaming chairs for the comfort of working at home, loungewear, even fitness equipment and all that. So especially with air capacity sharply reduced, a lot of this demand spilled over into the sea freight side. That was why it caused that sudden shoot up in terms of the demand. But fortunately or unfortunately, in the second quarter, we were looking at economic contraction. So quite a lot of the shipping lines were also laying up their vessels or sending them for installation of green scrubbers and all that. So when the demand shot up, there was a situation where there was preliminary insufficient capacity to soak up this additional demand. And with the trade imbalances continuing and all that, it suddenly became like a sharp rebound, a sharp V. And because the vessel capacity started to see shortages, we also saw freight rates kind of starting to shoot up. Moving into fourth quarter, that was when all the festive demands came in, Christmas, pre-CNY. So the contention, the fight for vessel space became even stronger. And unfortunately, it was also during this period where we saw the resurgence of the pandemic in several of our key gateway hubs, economies like Europe, US, and even back in China as well. So all this impact, as in the pandemic resurgence, also had an impact in terms of the labor workforce that were working in these gateway hubs. So that kind of lengthened the turnaround time of the vessels at those gateway hubs. As the ports stay lengthened, then all the downstream ports were also affected because the vessel arrivals were looking to be later than usual coming into downstream ports, especially like transshipment hubs in Singapore. The containers in the gateway hubs were also staying on longer than usual, lack of manpower to clear these imports and exports. And as the pandemic, continues, right now we already know that it has already seen like a fourth or even fifth wave of resurgence in a lot of the economies. That's when all these disruptions are really amplified throughout the global nodes. So now we are seeing like exponential cargo rollovers, erratic vessel schedules and port omissions, and all the lack of manpower is also worsening at some of the gateway ports, especially the intra-regional ports. Yeah. So in the next slide, we also took a look at how the epicenter of the virus had continued to shift throughout last year until this year. And really that web of uncertainties was just moving around as the virus shifted throughout the whole world. All these were just, headlines that we had plucked out from media on how the different economies had been impacted. And Singapore being at the crossroads of major trade lanes, trade flows, is not spared from all this as well. In fact, at Singapore, we felt the shocks more keenly being absorbed at our side because of all the upstream and downstream disruptions that are happening. Okay, so at the port capacity side, as a terminal operator, and not just us, in fact, all terminal operators throughout the world, we were feeling from that impact of that sudden surge in demand. But again, the vessels are not arriving in time at the port, and when they arrive, they were actually having that higher throughput per call. So that really is creating that a bit of a shock on all the global ports throughout. Moving on to the next slide, we took a deeper look at how some of the unexpected events and weather extremes also amplified the disruptions across the global supply chains. So it's not just the effects of the pandemic. We also had weather extremes, for example, like the severe winter weather in Texas, where at one point of time impacted seriously the petrochemical production, ex-US. And then, of course, this year, there was that very famous incident, Suez Canal blockage. Yeah, so all this, whether you call it black swan events, unexpected events, amplified all the disruptions that were caused already by the pandemic itself. So just taking an example for the Suez Canal blockage, for PSA Singapore, during that period, we had assisted a total of 45 calls within a 2-week window that was directly impacted by the Suez blockage. So after the Suez Canal reopened, the blockage kind of cleared from the canal, but there was this wave of vessels that were coming towards PSA Singapore. And we had to, quickly alleviate the situation by turning over these vessels so that we can send them off onward to their other destinations, right? Next slide. Okay, so a lot of the shippers, customers that have come to PSA for feedback is that, why is it that my shipments are arriving later than usual, especially if it's like local imports. So we have extracted some stats here to show you how keenly that impact is being felt by hub ports like Singapore, especially when it relates to the lower schedule reliability of vessel arrivals at the port itself. So these stats are not pertaining to PSA Singapore. In fact, they are taken from Sea Intelligence, like a consultancy report to show the kind of global schedule reliability for vessels throughout the world. Now, if you look at the first chart on the left-hand side, that red line there actually shows their reliability of arrivals at the port in terms of 2021 stats. So this year, we are looking at a 30% accuracy or reliability in terms of their vessel schedules. Meaning to say, let's say if a vessel is set, let's say if I have 10 vessels, okay, that tells me that they will berth at PSA Singapore tomorrow 12 noon. Okay, so that is what they have advised to us. But of all these 10 vessels, only 30% are expected to arrive on time. The rest will be late and out of window. And then the second chart that you see here shows the number of days in terms of the late vessel arrivals. So right now it's at an average of about more than 7, close to 8 days. Meaning to say, again, if the vessel tells me tomorrow they're arriving at PSA Singapore terminals 12 noon, then most likely they are going to arrive next week, 1 week later. And like I said, these stats are not from PSA Singapore, it's actually global. So can you imagine if every port down the supply chain is facing a delay of 7 to 8 days, then that is why for the shipper side, we will see the vessel schedule sometimes being delayed for 2 weeks or even more than that. Yeah, so this drop in global liner schedule integrity actually puts the strains on all nodes across the supply chain. And it's not just on the global ports itself, but if you magnify it upstream and downstream in a particular supply chain, those are impacted as well. Okay, yeah. So what has PSA done in order to help mitigate some of these challenges that are happening in global ports throughout the world? We first bring the attention back to Singapore because PSA Singapore is the world's largest transshipment hub, and we handle 1/10 of the world's transshipment throughput. So we understand the kind of critical trade flows that flow via Singapore. And at Singapore itself, for PSA, when the pandemic happens and we sort of realize that, okay, this is going to have a deep impact on our port operations, first and foremost, our focus is really on saving lives, sustaining livelihoods, and keeping the supply chains flowing. On saving lives and sustaining livelihoods, why this is important is because we need to protect our workforce and make sure they are healthy and safe so that we can keep the port operational 24/7, so that your trade flows can also still flow through as smoothly as possible. So if you look at the right-hand side of this slide, protecting our workforce through robust health and safety management, within PSA itself, especially for our frontline workers who are interfacing with the vessel operations, we have implemented quite a number of very strict measures. For example, like contactless operations between our frontline workers and the ship crew. And there are very, very regular disinfecting, deep cleaning of common areas that are used by our port workers. Of course, all the testing of whether it's a PCR test, ART test, and all that, very, very strict regimes for them to undergo. So all this is done with the purpose of making sure that we still have the workforce ready to maintain the service levels for our customers. And then on the left-hand side, we have also ramped up the physical capacity through the reactivation of our city terminals, right? So pre-COVID, I would say majority of our operations are at Pasir Panjang, but COVID itself has also made us reactivated some of the berths at our Keppel, Tanjong Pagar, Brani side of the terminals to try and soak up the additional demand that the vessels are sending our way. And then our Tuas port, you may have read in media reports that in this year, 4th quarter, which is like now, we have also started operations. We are sending some containers over there. So while Tuas, I would say, is not a knee-jerk reaction to dealing with the pandemic, at PSA, we are very glad and proud that we have done this capacity planning way ahead of time. And now Tuas port is ready to also come into play to help with alleviating some of these challenges as well. Okay, so the previous slide talks about what PSA has done internally in terms of the capacity and the workforce to help maintain the service levels. Now for this slide, we are looking at the kind of dialogues that we have had with our customers in order to make sure that we can reach out to them and detangle the stresses of supply chains. So 2 sets of customers, namely, first and foremost, the shipping lines, which are always our very valuable set of customers. Always a regular dialogue and close collaboration with them. And in this time and period, a very special focus on the clearance of longer dwell containers, because why? We do need to free up the yard space so that the new vessels that are coming in can also use Singapore as a hub port for the onward connections for their other vessels, right? So we do need to do that regular keeping house clearance in order to ensure that we have sufficient capacity to bring in the new containers. We're also working with the shipping lines to have that accurate declaration of volumes per call, provide the prompt update of vessel arrival timings, because that's really helping in optimizing our planning. On the shipper's side, the cargo owner side, we are also doing that proactive outreach to help them with urgent shipments, diversification of their transportation options, and looking at ways to streamline their supply chains for efficiency. So in the next few slides, we will look at some examples on how some specific customers have asked us for solutions to help mitigate the challenges. This is a summary of the kind of feedback that we have gathered from the shippers. So 4 major themes that they have asked for help on: visibility and reduced monitoring efforts. Most of the time when shippers come to us, they're either asking, where is the vessel that's carrying my container, or where is my container? Is it arriving in Singapore yet? Is it still on waters? So visibility is very important to them, right? Having that visibility, they would also like to have that enhanced flexibility in order to override the exceptions. So if there's an exception, I know the vessel is arriving late and my production line is running behind time. What flexible options do I have to catch up on my schedule? That also relates to better control of the supply chains. And all this will also mean that they will need some form of intelligent and informed decision-making through data analytics, tapping on data digitalization, as Chong Ming has mentioned in his earlier on speech. Yeah. Okay, next slide. Okay, so the first slide here on what kind of solution we have helped the customers with. This is really this solution called priority discharge. 2 examples here, one high-tech conglomerate and one customer handling aviation parts for a strategic national project. Common theme is that they have their shipments coming in from other parts of the world. One is more, actually quite long haul as well, one from Long Beach and then the other one from Hamburg, right? But the vessel arrivals were late at PSA. The schedules were already erected and the vessels were arriving late in Singapore. Their production lines were running behind time seriously. And if it's going to be a production stoppage, right, then the amount of losses could be quite substantial, right? So when they came to PSA and asked first and foremost, where is my container? We helped them did a check, and we were able to give that certainty of when the vessel will be arriving in Singapore. And with that certainty, we also facilitated a priority discharge of their shipments of their containers, and they made it in time in the end to their customer plants as well, right? So the customers in these 2 separate cases managed to have that similar benefits from our solutioning. One is the ease of mind with visibility because they know for certain when the vessel is arriving in Singapore. The other one is the ability to uphold their internal service levels of production schedules. Okay. So previously we talked about inbound local into Singapore. Here, this example from this paper and pulp company came to us for help on the transshipment connection via Singapore. So they actually produce exports out of a Southeast Asia river ports, and these exports were brought from a small barge into Singapore for onward transshipment. Okay, so in transshipment planning norms, there needs to be a certain time gap between the incoming barge vessel and the outgoing mother vessel. But unfortunately, in this case, because of the delays in schedules, the barge, as in the first carrier, actually arrived 34 hours later than the outgoing mother vessel has berthed at our terminals. So in usual scenarios, shipping lines, most of the shipping lines would have shut out your cargo and would have told the shipper that no, the connection is impossible to be made. So you need to stay in port for some period of time before I find my next available sailing schedule for you. But in this case, when the shipper came to us, we were able to look into our planning norms, and we managed to facilitate what we call this negative connection or hot connection. So the container didn't have to stay in port for an additional 11 days. We actually helped them to prevent the storage, detention, and additional demurrage costs that could have been incurred if they had stayed in the port for those additional days. Yeah. Moving on. Okay, so some of the shippers, besides just visibility and a just-in-time kind of supply chain management, they are also looking increasingly more at just-in-case kind of supply chain management where they build up some inventory stocks closer to their end markets so that they can dispatch these stocks to the end markets as and when needed in times of exceptions, right? And for just in case, actually digitalization is more important because you will need to know where your stocks are at the different hubs in the global supply chains. So moving on to the next slide, we have this example from one of our Middle East petrochemical players who is actively using this forward hub partnership with PSA Singapore. So they actually forward stage their exports from Middle East in Singapore, even though they do not know where their products are being sold to yet. They do have a vague idea, rough idea that Asia is probably going to be the biggest market, but when it's first discharged in Singapore, they still do not know which end destination it's going to. But we help them to maintain a special transshipment status at the port itself, and then it stays inside the free trade zone, no unpacking of the cargo, no need to pay import duties and GSTs. And when they manage to find the sales, then we can help them connect onto the relevant vessels. So this actually helps them to achieve that faster lead time to end destination, because if there is a demand, instead of shipping from source, they can just dispatch it out from Singapore at a short period of time. Okay, so some other chemical players which have added variation to this kind of forward hub partnership is one of our other customers, a USA company. Okay, so I think during this period, shipping lines are also crying out for container shortages, and perhaps that kind of staging in PSA yard for, let's say, 14 days or so is quite strenuous to the shipping line itself. So some of the shipping lines may not be able to provide this longer storage period of the container to our customers. So the customers came to us to say, why don't we look at, de-vending the cargo upon discharge in Singapore, still within the free trade zone, but we de-vend. We either use a PSA lease box in between for storage, and then when it's time for loading, I can look for another carrier to help me export the container, or we can just do a direct transloading from a carrier A into a carrier B box. So this actually helps the shipper, right, this USA shipper, to try and balance off the demurrage cost on both ends of the carrier, rather than being subject to a very substantial spike in demurrage cost from just carrier A alone after passing a certain free period of storage, right? And then interestingly, there was another European bio-based producer where they came to us to say, okay, my container that I brought in initially, I thought maybe it's going to Thailand, but now I think the demand in Vietnam is better and I want to sell it there. So can you help me do some relabeling of the cargo inside from a Thai label to a Vietnamese label? We were able to help them do that within the free trade zone as well. So it really helps them to adapt to the changing demand. Yeah. Moving on. Okay, so the previous two slides, we talked about having the container in its full form inside the free trade zone. Now, this other customer has also told us that instead of having that full container load inside the terminals, they actually need to bring it out of the port gate itself to do some repacking of the container, of the cargo inside the container before it's repackaged into the container and shipped out again. So here we were also able to facilitate regional distribution center or RDC activities for them as well. So besides repacking and palletizing, now we're also in discussion with this player for actually local distribution needs. So inbound into Singapore, you can actually truck to this warehousing facility by PSA, and we help you do the sorting and all that. If not, if there are like import, re-export, multi-country consolidation activities required, we can also help the customer do this as well. So this solution that we customize for them has proven to be quite well received for them, because it's like PSA being a single touch point and also offering them that visibility of vessel arrivals, which can complement the solutions that we have on the warehousing side. Okay, yeah. Okay, so all the previous slides, we have talked about Singapore as a node itself, where shippers have come to us to say, what can you help me with in terms of Singapore? These are my challenges at this specific node. Now, we also have other customers who have come to us to say, I have this set of challenges throughout my supply chain. And some of these nodes at my supply chain complement with your overseas ports. So in a way, there is a PSA port to PSA port connection. Can you help me see how to mitigate some of these challenges? Like this particular leading energy player, they have raw materials coming in from Chinese port to their customer plants in Singapore, where they need to do some processing of the raw materials and then convert it into production. But you can see on the slide here, throughout every node, they have challenges at every single point of the shipping of the supply chain. But it turns out that the China port which they export out from is actually also operated by PSA, because we do have a global footprint, right? So they came to us and said, can you help me work out a solution that is comprising of an overall control tower monitoring, first mile logistics, to managing the import of the export of the cargo from your Chinese port coming into Singapore, and then expediting, for example, priority discharge or express delivery. So between your PSA teams, you can do that enhanced informational exchanges. But for me, I just network with you and you give me that certainty of the visibility, what is happening to my shipment. Yeah, so this solution was also very well received by our customer. Moving on, the next slide. Okay, so this next slide is even going further in terms of the end-to-end. The previous one was China to Singapore. This one was even from Germany to Singapore onward to Thailand, right? So for the port of load in Antwerp and then coming to Singapore and then going on to Thailand, PSA was also present in 3 of the nodes. So again, we were able to come up with the end-to-end solutioning to mitigate some of the problem statements like the low reliability of their shipment arrival and the lack of flexibility, because this customer was using only one carrier for their shipment. And I think the erratic vessel schedules was causing quite a bit of problems for them. So we deep dive into their supply chain to do process mapping, and through our intelligent route advisory capabilities, we were able to propose alternative sailings for them. Yeah. Okay, so I think it is important, like what Chong Ming mentioned, for cargo owners, for customers to know that it is possible to tap on the connectedness of Singapore, either from our air connectivity side or sea connectivity side, to ensure that you have that business flexibility and resilience built into your supply chain. So this look here simply shows from the PSA's Port of Singapore perspective, the kind of weekly sailings that we have between that region and Singapore. Like for example, Southeast Asia, on a weekly basis, Singapore to Southeast Asia and back, we have 230 sailings. So that's the kind of connectivity advantage you can make use of in order to get your goods connected faster and more smoothly. And don't worry about the shipping alliances, because I think we have partnerships, long-term partnerships with most of the shipping carriers that are, in fact, all of the major shipping carriers that are applying the world's trade routes today. So just make use of the full connectivity to instill that business resilience. So making use of the connectivity side, I will now pass on to my colleague Teo Chin to also share with you how some customers have talked to us about multimodal solutions.
So thank you, Karen, for the insightful sharing. I'm Chin, and I'm very happy to continue the sharing. I'll be sharing more about a growing trend that we've been seeing recently, and I'll also share some of the intermodal transportation examples that we've worked together with shippers on, as well as some of the digital solutions before I end the session and kickstart the Q&A session. So one of the interesting trends that we've been seeing is that shippers are increasingly asking for other modes of transports, such as intermodal options, with the current disruptions that they are facing. So as Karen mentioned, the global supply chain disruptions have caused freight rates to escalate exponentially. And freight rates currently are with a very short validity period, which means that there is a lot of uncertainty and added costs to shippers. And with the congestions faced in gateway ports and the vessels rerouting, ocean transit times have become very erratic. And this is one of the main points raised by many shippers, as shared by Karen earlier on as well. So there has been a lot of disruptions, for example, the Suez Canal blockage that has affected long-haul shipping through the Suez, as well as the Three Gorges North Line ship lock that has affected shipping to inland China via Shanghai down the Yangtze River. So for cargo solutions, we have explored a few solutions with our customers to enable efficient cross-border supply chain flows. And with one of the solution being the International Land Sea Trade Corridor, or the ILSTC, and another being the CS solutioning. So just to share, Jurong Island is really home to more than 100 leading global chemical companies, and many of them ship to key markets like Central China. So for such supply chain flows, the traditional mode that shippers go by is to truck from Jurong Island to our main terminals for export, and we will ship them to Shanghai, and they will be barged via the Yangtze River into Central China. So not sure how many listening in today are from the energy and chemical sector, but we've worked closely with many shippers that are situated within Jurong Island. And these players are facing a lot of supply chain pain points, and they've shared them with us as well. So PSA operates a very small batch terminal, the Jurong Island terminal, and it has a pivotal role in supporting Singapore's vision as a chemical hub. So by connecting the chemical players via barge from Jurong Island to the main terminals, JIT barging can enable more than 30% savings in greenhouse gas emissions compared to the traditional mode of direct trucking from Jurong Island terminals to main terminals. So once the containers get into JIT, the operations management and onward connection will be managed by PSA, which really gives a lot of our shippers a peace of mind because they will not need to spend efforts coordinating continuously. So thereafter, containers are shipped from Singapore to Qingzhou BPCT port, which is operated by us as well. So there is this synergy right there. And then the onward connection via rail from Qingzhou to inland Western China is also connected seamlessly. So this sustainable hinterland to intermodal connectivity solution is really an alternative that we propose to the traditional mode of transport. And this intermodal solution is really called the JIT ILSTC. And as ever mentioned, ILSTC refers to the International Land Sea Trade Corridor. And this is to support shippers by enhancing their logistics connectivity between Western China, Southeast Asia, and the rest of the world via Singapore. And given the disruptions going on earlier this year at a lot of the main Chinese ports, this has served many shippers by reducing their transit time by almost half and providing reliable schedules with seamless connectivity from sea to rail. Next slide. Yep. So we've also worked with an e-commerce logistics company to orchestrate their multimodal sea air freight as well. So this mode can be used on time-sensitive cargo, and they are usually because air freight capacity, as Karen has mentioned as well, is quite scarce now, and it's really usually very costly. So this mode will allow shippers to reap the full benefits of a shorter lead time of air freight and a relatively lower cost of sea freight compared to air freight. So whilst maintaining the service levels. So we've helped an e-commerce logistics service provider orchestrate the sea-air connectivity from Hong Kong. Instead of dispatching the cargo straight from Hong Kong to destination via air freight totally, cargo is shipped by sea to Singapore, and we help to facilitate the sea-air connection seamlessly to dispatch the cargo from Singapore via air. And this shipper was able to tap on Singapore's excellent air connectivity to the rest of the world. And of course, with the first leg being sea freight, the shipper was able to ship a larger amount of cargo at any one time from Hong Kong to Singapore for onward distribution. Next. So to support a more connected and collaborative supply chain ecosystem, PSA has jointly developed a global supply chain platform called Calista with our partner Global E-Trade Services. So Calista is an integrated platform that brings together the different stakeholders in the supply chain community to optimize the flow across the entire ecosystem. So through clear milestones and monitoring of the entire shipment cycle as shown on the screen, it allows the shippers to be more informed to detect and to act on exceptions proactively rather than falling victim to an information black hole, as mentioned by Karen earlier on as well. So there's also no need for additional efforts and coordination to extract information from multiple different sites and platforms constantly. So for control tower monitoring, if exceptions can be detected and value-added services such as priority discharge can be triggered automatically, that can be done as well. So this is without the need for the shipper themselves to do the monitoring. And this will in turn ensure timely intervention at the earliest possible time to mitigate any further downstream impacts. Next slide. So Calista endeavors to help shippers orchestrate their cargo flow from source to end destinations, and it spans across not just physical flows, but informational and financial and regulatory spheres as well. So for instance, shippers, freight forwarders, carriers can interact with one another in a single platform for freight booking, shipping, instruction submissions, bill of lading preview, shipment status monitoring, trade advisory, all in one platform. And this will provide shippers with a consolidated platform for accurate and timely information. So this brings us to our last slide. What we have shared today is to give you an idea of why these challenges in the supply chains are really happening and the effects that these supply chain disruptions have on hub ports as well as shippers. And shippers have shared with us many of their struggles, and we've also shared some examples of the way we collaborated with them to enable them with a more optimized supply chain flow to overcome their challenges. So in this time and era, flexibility and agility can come from collaboration, and with our global footprint and as the world's largest transshipment hub as well, we stand ready to work with many of you to mitigate some of the pain points that you are experiencing. Next slide, yeah. So we've actually prepared a QR code, and of course our emails are in this slide as well. So if you'd like to connect with us on any of our solutioning, right, please scan the QR code and leave your contacts and we can get in touch as well. Thank you.
Thanks, Teo Chin, for the sharing. So, Chong Ming at the start of his sharing also talked about open conversation. And I hope all of us while attending today can understand that all the solutions that we have shared are actual solutions that have taken place because of the open conversations that we have had with some of our customers. So in order to have that resilience, business resilience, flexibility, I think there's also this mindset of being open to innovative solutions, collaborating with different partners, and that's what we are looking forward to. So feel free to scan the QR code, and then we will also start taking some of the questions. I see 4 questions here. Oh, actually, 5th one is coming up. Okay, let me look at the first one now. What was the turnaround time and what is the turnaround time now? What does PSA foresee in the coming months and also in 2022? Now, this turnaround time, I am assuming that we are referring to the time taken to turn around a vessel at the Singapore port itself, right? So maybe for this question, I will hand it over to my colleague BD to do some sharing.
Typically, so for us, before the pandemic, most of the vessels, I think we can handle within plus minus 4 hours. I think 95% of the time, they can berth on time within plus minus 4 hours. This based on their schedule. That means when they are here, they say they're going to berth on this time, we can berth. Then depending on the vessel size, also it's very difficult to have a time to say for this vessel size, what's the turnaround time, depending on the activity of the vessel itself. So for the smaller ship, probably half a day. Then for the bigger one, maybe about 1 day. But now we are seeing for the smaller ones, probably can take up to 1 day, and the bigger ones almost up to 2 days, because the port itself, the container yard is very congested. So you need to start digging out all the containers to load on the vessel. So it will take more time to load a vessel. So that's the kind of turnaround that we are looking at. But of course, we have, I think I understand from the news that we have actually put in a lot of manpower to handle all this, to make sure that the vessel can sail as soon as possible in order to do the catch up for the rest of the supply chain. So that's what we have been doing. Okay, back to Karen.
Yeah, so also to add on to what Riddhi has shared, right? Turnaround time is also dependent on the amount of containers that we handle from a vessel, on and off a vessel. And if you remember, I mentioned at the start of our session, right? Right now, the throughput that we are handling, the number of containers per call that we are handling for the vessels has also increased a lot. Right, so maybe in the past, a 5,000 TEU vessel could be discharging a 2,000 TEU volume at our terminals, but right now it could be 4,000, double. So that turnaround time is also longer as well. And why they need to do this could be because downstream ports are not open. Let's say if there is congestion in India and all that, so they have to discharge all the cargoes here. So various factors, but what I can assure you is that PSA, we are definitely putting in all our resources to help with this turnaround time. In fact, the number of key cranes that we are working right now to turn around the vessels are actually higher than pre-COVID. Yeah. So if let's say you do still face challenges because the turnaround time is impacting some of your shipment flows and all that, do get in touch with us, and then we can see what other solutions we can help with. Okay.
So on the turnaround time again, so actually most of the time the issue with a shipper, let's say import, the situation that you face is usually not because of the turnaround time in PSA itself. It's because of the vessel that you pick. That means whoever that's loading the container at the load port, they may have picked a vessel that decided to skip Singapore. That means they have a delay at the previous port. Then when reaching Singapore, they decided not to call Singapore. So they just skip Singapore, then they maybe go to Port Klang. Then after that, they send another vessel to collect the container, then come in. So the overall delay that you face could be up to like 7 days. Even though to us, we didn't really serve the vessel at all. That's one way. The other way, you can look at it for some vessels, they can go, that means they can actually, from let's say South China, go all the way until, let's say India, for example. Then after coming back to Singapore again, then go back to India, for example. So they may actually, at the southbound leg, right, they decided to skip Singapore. So you only receive your container at the northbound leg when they return back to Singapore. So you feel like, hey, how come it's like 2 weeks delay to me? When PSA is telling me, hey, my turnaround is 2 days. So that's what's happening in the whole supply chain right now. So if you need that kind of advice, I think you can look for us. We can tell you what are the vessels that are slightly more reliable, because not all the vessels can just skip Singapore and then proceed with their journey. Why do I say that? It's because, let's say for a vessel that's from South China, let's say, for example, heading towards, let's say, Europe, they are less likely to skip Singapore, because they can bring the next cycle coming back probably could be 20, 30 days later. Then you'll kill the shipping line. So those cases, they are less likely to skip us. So we have that reliability and that visibility. Then we know roughly what are the schedule that can bring your vessel to Singapore in a more reliable way.
I also see in the chat box here, there's a particular question also by same Mr. NH. You mentioned that PSA is already working with most shipping alliance on transparency, but more time when we check with them, they reply that they don't know. Is PSA not telling maybe the time or the truth? Okay. Actually, shipping lines and shippers are all our valued set of customers. Okay, so when we say that we work with them on transparency, indeed at PSA, we do have good visibility of when the vessel are arriving at Singapore, because we do need them to plan their berthing windows with us. I hope cargo owners can also understand that sometimes your shipping lines may not be able to tell you the full spectrum of info for commercial reasons, because it can impact the commercial contracts or arrangements between you and the shipping line, right? So that's where we encourage also the shippers, you can come to us directly and we can give you that alternative suggestion. So for example, sometimes you may encounter a shipping line telling you, I'm waiting at a port, maybe it's not just PSA Singapore, it could be any other port. I'm waiting at a port 7 days and I still don't get above. But maybe upon checking, it could be because the shipping line is late from departure from the previous port, and then they are still in transit to Singapore, not to Singapore, to other ports, right? Or it could also be that, if let's say a terminal is prepared to receive 10 vessels a day, but you have 20 vessels arriving alongside, then the shipping lines will need to do some prioritization as well. Yeah, so do pardon your shipping line friends if you feel that they are not as transparent and open. They do have their reasons as well. So this is where we encourage an open conversation with the terminal operators. You can come to us and we can see how to mitigate and help with some solutions. Okay. One other question that I'll pick. Okay, several questions on intermodal solutions, because I think that's what Teo Chin spoke about at the later part of our presentation. Different intermodal solutions also mean many nodes of operations. Wouldn't it mean more potential for errors? How does PSA ensure the handshake between different parties is smooth? Right. So for us, in terms of our global footprint, we don't just operate in coastal ports overseas. We have also invested in rail nodes overseas. Like for example, in China, we have invested in this entity that's operating about 13 railway terminal stations throughout China. And then we have partnerships in India, rail partnerships in India as well. We also have a rail facility partnership in Ashcroft, right? So when the customers come to us and look for us for intermodal solutions, we will try to see how to match our intermodality nodes, whether it's sea and then onward to rail. And because it's a PSA team talking to a PSA team, we are able to ensure that smooth handshake. Okay. Even let's say if you need to cross borders for customs clearance and all that, we also have a strong network of partners locally. Like for example, in China, if you need to do China to Europe solution or the other way around. So far, we have tried a couple of shipments for customers and the handshake has been pretty smooth. So if you are interested, you can connect us offline through the QR code. And that goes for this question as well. Can you comment if there is intermodal transportation solution for shipment to Mongolia? I think we can look into what you need because Mongolia is also quite an area. So we need to know exactly where the end location is so we can connect with you offline on that, right? Okay, so let me pick another question. Sustainable solutions often come at a higher cost. Who should pick up the tab for this? Vidi, you want to take this question as well?
Oh, me again. Okay, this is.
Let me drink some water.
Yeah, in terms of sustainable solution, actually is how should I put it? It's a matter of time. That's why a lot of people is looking at this aspect. So how should I put it? So like countries like, if I recall correctly, Sweden or Switzerland, I think their carbon tax is about 125 USD per ton. Singapore is still about $5 kind of stuff. So longer term wise, I think all these taxes will start to go up. So there's really a real need. So that means in the longer term, you will end up be paying for this cost. So it's important that you start looking for a good solution now so that you can actually transform towards that means go towards that journey to deliver the kind of sustainability that's necessary so that you don't incur all those taxes. So it's a journey. You see from the perspective that it's a journey for you towards a more sustainable solution so that you in future you won't incur all those carbon taxes. So I think that's what a lot of enterprises are doing right now. So I think if you want to put it more bluntly, actually finally the government wants you to pay in that sense, yes.
Thanks, Vidi. I really like that idea of journey because to see it as a higher cost and who should pay for it is kind of binary. It's all or nothing. It's either you or me. But in terms of that journey, sustainability is definitely going to be a key focus in supply chains moving forward. And it's a journey that all of us have to make together. Okay, also several questions on digitalization. I think we have two questions here on how to access to Callista. You can scan the QR code or write to any one of us via the email. We can connect with you offline on that. There's this question here, how different is Callista from the other platforms out there? Such platforms need different players on board. To what extent has Callista network been established? Okay, how different is Callista from the other networks platforms out there? Honestly, we know for sure that there are a lot of platforms out there. Some do freight booking, some do trade compliance methods, some are financing, some can track and trace, do visibility tracking and all that. So for Callista, when PSA first envisioned this network, which is in development with our partner, Global E-Trade Services, we wanted to aggregate the three flows together. The three flows meaning physical flow of the cargo, informational flow of documentation, as well as financing flows. So that is the vision that we have set up Callista to be. And honestly, right now, in terms of the physical flow, it's quite established. We have linkages to shipping lines to do freight booking, booking confirmation, submission of shipping instructions and all that. Trade compliance, we are connected to 61 customs nodes throughout the world. So there can be an sync up between the customs documentation transmission between different customs nodes, right? And then financing, we are also in the starting up stages to work on this option with some financing institutions and small, medium and enterprises in Singapore. So yes, a lot of players on board. You need shipping lines, you need cargo owners, you need even rail players. Let's say if intermodal solutions, you need track and trace and all that. I would say it's an evolving journey. It will be quite difficult to explain, to say that, oh, Callista is 70% or 80% established now, because digitalization is an evolving journey. What we are seeing in the world today as disruptions and the solutions will not be different maybe next year or the year after. So I think it's more important that we keep an open mindset with the partners that we are working with to see how we can evolve the development of Callista moving forward. Okay. You mentioned a lot of help given to shippers, especially to big boys, MNCs. How about small players or companies? No, actually, for some of those examples, some of them are the smaller size players as well. So no worries. We look at the value in which we can help you to extract from the supply chain, not really in terms of the size of the shippers or companies that we work with. Okay. With the current situation, what is the one thing that have the biggest impact to shippers to navigate the current environment? I think that's really having an open mindset to collaborate with different players, look at innovative solutions, the mindset to be able to redesign supply chains. Because like what Chong Ming mentioned, most of the companies would have BCPs, business continuity plans, but even business continuity plans set up in the past may not be as meaningful in today's context where the disruptions are very new and normal and accelerating at a different pace than before. So mindset is more important than anything. At least that's my personal take on it. Yeah. Carriers are also moving into logistics. How do you view your relationship with the various stakeholders? One keyword, collaboration. Again, it just links back to the theme of open conversation, collaboration, so that we can build resilience. I don't think anyone can do anything by themselves in today's context, especially in the maritime industry, which is so fragmented, thousands of players in this supply chain alone. So collaboration, collaborative spirit is definitely more important than, let's say, competition. Yeah, so that's how we view our relationship with the various stakeholders. So in fact, logistics service providers have been connecting with us as well to see how we can provide combined synergies or solutions to some of the cargo owners.
Yeah. Actually, on this point, right, I think this is not something new. I mean, it has been happening in this industry for quite many years. I think like MERS, all this Demco, I think you all know, CMA also with SIVA. So I think it's not something new. I think it's about value creation. So if we can bring value and then as a hub port, and then we can add more value to all these carrier with the logistics functionalities, I think we can even add more value to the cargo owners who hub in Singapore. So that's how we always view it.
Okay, I'm mindful of time. I've scrolled through most of the questions we have answered. If not, please feel free to write in to us and seek clarity if we have not been as clear as you have expected us to be. One last question to round up the session: what shipping lines will be calling at Tuas Terminal? Now, I mentioned that Tuas has been operational, but starting up a port is very different from, let's say, if you are moving house, it can just start up operations the next day. So for us, we are very mindful of maintaining that service levels to our customers. First and foremost, we will be moving shipping lines that have got more interdependent connections to Tuas, so that if it's, let's say, local import export, they can also just pick up from Tuas itself. If there are a lot of interconnections between, let's say, Pasir Panjang and Tuas, that also can maybe have some impact on the service level. So right now it will be on a smaller scale, shipping lines who have more interdependent connections to be shifted to Tuas. But in any case, rest assured to the community here, we stand by our commitment that the service levels in terms of connections on off the vessels, transshipment or import export will still be maintained to the community. Yeah. Okay. Do we have, yeah, seems like we have answered all the questions. It being a Friday afternoon, we really thank you for your attention, right? And I hope today's session has really been useful. If not, feel free to connect with us offline if you have other burning questions. And once again, we really thank you for spending your Friday afternoon with us. Yes, thank you so much. ESG, Chong Ming, do you want to say anything to round up the session?
No, I'm good. Thanks, Karen.
Okay. So thank you, everybody. Have a good Friday and continue to stay safe, keep healthy.
Yep, stay safe.
Bye-bye.
Yep. Bye.